Now, this is the most challenging part of the PFMP exam application. After filling in the application, it will be shared with the panel reviewers in order to kick off their review. Experience summaries must be clear and concise. Each answer of the experience summary should be between 300 and 400 words. I'm advising you to never use answers from other candidates' applications. The reviewers or the panelists will notice that. So avoid using or copying the answers of other candidates. Now, some of the tips which you need to keep in mind while you are filling in your exam application. Always answer using I. Avoid using we or us or our or together. Always use I. I did. I worked. I developed. Talk about what you personally did, how you did it, and why you did it. Okay? Refrain from using words like I delegated to a team member, or I helped my organization, or I guided a group of fresh graduates. This is not recommended. Refrain from using such words. Avoid definitions found on books or Google web pages. This will be detected by the panel. Don't use industry-specific terminology. For example, if I'm working, or actually I'm working in the infrastructure or construction industry, and I used the terminology like MEP, anyone who is involved in the construction industry will know that MEP means mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. But if the panelist is from an IT background, he will not be aware, or she will not be aware with this terminology. So avoid using any industry-specific terminology. Now you will have 5 sections to fill as per the 5 PFMP exam domains. For each domain, you will have 2 options. You need to select one of them and brief your answer. So the first domain of the portfolio management is the strategic management. And for option A, identified and prioritized portfolio criteria and evaluated portfolio component priorities based on the organization's strategic goals and objectives. This is the first option. If you want to go with this option, here is some tips for answering this option. You can use the concepts or how I'm talking about my experience. I will not go through all the answers. You can just pause here and read and make use of these steps while you are filling your application. But the first paragraph, when I was a portfolio manager for Portfolio X, there was a lot of projects, programs, and sub-programs within the organization. I was keen to use this inventory of work. What's inventory of work? We will explain later in the course, and consider it as a starting point for my portfolio. I started with reviewing and understanding the vision and mission behind strategic goals and objectives, which my portfolio was set to realize. This is only a tip of how I'm going to answer this option. Option B for strategic management, created and or updated a portfolio roadmap based on the organization's strategic goals and objectives. So the second option is about the portfolio roadmap, which I will explain later on in the strategic management knowledge area section. Some tips for answering. For example, looking at the last paragraph, I updated the roadmap on continuous basis to validate deliveries, challenges, and risk level changes. And I used the roadmap with the executive management in our calls and meetings to gauge performance. The roadmap was used as well to communicate the linkage between the organizational strategy and objectives and portfolio management. Okay, so you need to fill like 300 words on average for each answer. You need to answer one of the options only, either option A or option B. You will have 2 options for each domain. For the second domain, it's about governance, and it is covered in this course as a knowledge area with 5 processes. Option A defined and implemented a governance framework for the portfolio and or the portfolio components. Here are some tips for answering this option. For option B, for the governance domain, implemented and enhanced the governance aspects of the portfolio management plan in support of portfolio goals and objectives. And here are some tips for answering this option. The third domain is about performance management of the portfolio. And the first option is managed portfolio performance to optimize portfolio effectiveness and efficiency. This might include resource utilization, revenue enhancement, and expense reduction. And here are some tips for answering. For example, by looking at the third paragraph, in my portfolio, there was a clear need of developing a value measurement framework, and we will cover this concept later on in this course. Those are the reasons why I'm recommending you to fill in the application at the end of the course and not now. Due to the complexity of the portfolio and the large number of stakeholders, this framework was used to support governance board decision making. I then worked on the standardizing the performance reports that was issued by component managers. Option B of the performance management or the portfolio performance evaluated continuous progress toward the achievement of business or strategic goals through the measurement of the portfolio value. And here are some tips for answering this option. The fourth domain is the portfolio risk management, and the first option is defined and or enhanced the portfolio risk strategy, including tolerance and thresholds based on the portfolio goals and objectives. And here are some tips for answering. Let's take the last paragraph as an example. Throughout the portfolio life cycle, I, on continuous basis, monitored the portfolio risks, and I conducted analysis related to budget availability in order to assess the changes in the portfolio and their impact on the portfolio risks. I also continuously updated the risk register to elicit the current status of each risk, which supported the governance board decision-making process. Option B for the fourth domain enabled the organization to capitalize on opportunities or manage threats based on portfolio risk management processes, methods, and or techniques. And here are some tips for answering. And the last domain is the portfolio communication management. Option A developed and or updated a portfolio communication strategy to support effective decision making and achievement of portfolio goals and objectives. And here are some tips for answering. And the last option of the fifth domain, engage stakeholders to set and manage expectations and influence the success of the portfolio. And here are some tips for answering. Just let us look at the third paragraph. I maintained a transparent communication strategy throughout the portfolio life cycle in order to ensure that stakeholders are informed of the actual portfolio status and progress, which enhanced my credibility in the organization. Always give real examples using portfolio information, your portfolio information. So this is all for the PFMP exam application. You can refer back to this section at the end of the course. And this is my advice. Finish this course, refer back to this section, and then you can fill in your PFMP exam application using the tips of this lecture.